Hello, welcome back. Back to my ongoing series about my dear friend Tamlyn, who was the keyboard player for London After Midnight. Well, he was a complex one. And mind you, our friendship was rather complex, if not odd at points. You see, being his best friend, I got to know him very well, but he was very cryptic about shit. Most notably, his sexuality was odd at best. It was very detached, very despondent. You see, unbeknownst to me, he not only had a girlfriend, he was engaged to be married. I didn't know that. We hung out for 3 straight years before he even mentioned he was in a relationship. Who the fuck does that? Very disconnected person, I guess. Yet there it was. He's a stranger. I mean, he expressed he had no interest in men. And didn't really talk about women at all either. It was very strange. And yet, and here's the part that threw me, is every now and then, he'd use an excuse to hit on me. Now and then. And it's just, but this wasn't right away. This was after about 3 years into friendship. Because all this time, he acted more like a brother to me. I mean, sometimes he would invite me over and say, hey, you ever tried my fried chicken? I got the secret recipe from my family. I'm not going to tell you how to make it. And damn, it was pretty good. I gotta admit. I mean, it was one of those fucking things. Southern fucking boys. Yeah, they do have their secrets. They never talk about girls. I'll be the one. Because, particularly after 9/11, things got very rough and impossible for me to get my meds. I started to go through this slow detransition. It was gradual and slow, but then became very dramatic. And well, when you do that, all the testosterone that had been suppressed comes back in a very ugly way. And I want to fuck anything that moved. But one thing I didn't want to fuck was Tamlyn. Wasn't interested. And first off, I don't like men. Never have. But Tamlyn, if I were to swing that way, he wouldn't have been the one I would have been interested in. I mean, he was no Ross Williams. Well, I mean, let's be frank. I mean, he was kind. He was soft-spoken. But he was very cold, very despondent. And to get him to open up about things, you literally needed a can opener and a jackhammer at times, because he just wouldn't open up about shit. And then if he did, he would speak about things that either didn't make any fucking sense or that would probably disturb the crap out of you. I mean, he talked at length about his upbringing in Missouri or wherever he was from. How his father is so straight-laced and always giving him shit about his hair. He told me this tale back in 1988. He got really sick and needed to go to see a doctor, and his father blackmailed him to come back home. And once he got there, he told him, you're not getting any fucking health care unless you go to a fucking barber and cut all his hair off. And he reluctantly agreed, screaming, fuck you the whole time. And I couldn't believe anybody would have done something like that. I sure as hell wouldn't have. And God knows my dad tried to pull something very similar to that, but I wasn't going to fucking do it. Hell no. But Tamlyn was desperate. And this is before he made his name for himself, first as an animator. Well, sound engineer for animation. I mean, he did well with Ren and Stimpy. He did well enough. He made some actual good money from it. Whereas, we'll never know exactly what he made from London After Midnight. I do know that you can only make so much money off this. After all, I was married to Donnie Cancer, and she didn't make shit. She only made money if she played live. And even then, it wasn't very much. I mean, you could pay rent maybe. But Tamlyn's rent was pretty high. I mean, you saw the building he lived in over there on Wilcox. And so, you know, we'd hang out. You know, we'd hit a bar or two, or we just mostly hung out at his place, and he would play me this cool music that he was writing, or that he had created for London After Midnight that Sean didn't want to use. And, you know, we talk all kinds of shit, you know. But, I mean, mostly he was an ear for me when I needed to vent. And he would do that quite a bit. But, again, one of his big personality flaws was that he was the silent type. And Latinx people, we don't really like silent people very much. They get on our nerves. And, you know, again, in some quarters, it's seen as very disrespectful. Often could lead to fights and violence and even death in some quarters. There's some parts of this city that can get you killed. You know, you're just sitting there smiling. You're not adding a goddamn thing to the conversation, especially if you're hiding behind sunglasses. That could definitely get you killed in this city. You know, Tamlyn didn't seem to understand any of that. He was very fucking detached. There was something very fucking odd about him. I will get to the root causes in another video because it's just too complex and too odd to really get into. But as I was struggling to save my long-distance relationship with a girl in Brooklyn at the time, he'd kind of take advantage of that and say, I talked to her and she wanted me to give you this. And then he would just grab me and try to force himself on me and try to kiss me. And I didn't take too well to it, you know. I didn't appreciate that he was make these rash moves to try to get my affection. And again, this was like 3 years into our friendship. And, you know, unbeknownst to me, he was dating a woman named Tatiana. You know, really, you know, interesting lady. You know, she had some style, and, you know, but she didn't look like she was dating someone from a famous goth band, you know. I don't know, she seemed like an odd character out. I don't know what stage of their relationship, but it didn't make much sense. A lot of it didn't make much sense. And the fact he never talked about her, we never hung out with her. And, you know, for those first 3 years of us hanging out, it's almost like she didn't exist. I was completely unaware. In fact, I never even had a conversation with her until almost 4 years into our friendship. Our friendship lasted just roughly 5 years, roughly. And I didn't get to know Tatiana really till near the end. And dare I say, and again, this is unintentional, I somewhat was the catalyst for the end of their long nuptials that never came to be. You see, even before I transitioned, women, my male friends who were either engaged or married or in a long relationship, their women for some reason always came to me as a shoulder to cry on and to talk to me and air their woes and their gripes. And, you know, it sort of it damaged my reputation to a point where a few guys even who were in relationships even wanted me to know their fucking women. But that wasn't the case with Tamlyn. Tamlyn was so goddamn quiet about, you know, himself. He just rarely reveals shit. And when he did, it was strange and didn't make much sense. And in the next video, I'll elaborate on the big fucking bomb that haunted him. The big fucking deal. And it's a doozy. Trust me. I mean, I met a lot of people in this town. People, I've practically known everybody that was somebody in LA. And Tamlyn was a very unique person, and I've never met anyone like him. And I'm saying that in the kindest of terms because, you know, he was a dear friend. I mean, I appreciate him, but, you know, again, I wasn't attracted to him, and mostly because I don't swing that way. Now, secondly, he just wasn't, I didn't find him very romantic at all. Was rather surprised that he even had a fiance. That blew my mind, actually, to tell you the truth, because he seemed like the least romantic, least affectionate person I'd ever met. He was so fucking shut down. It's like, what is wrong with you? And anytime I'd ask about it, he would say, well, it's because I have this condition. I'm a Klinefelter, he would say. That's all he'd ever talk about. He never asked me about being a transsexual or what it is to be on hormones very much or anything like that. No interest in that. So again, like I said in the previous video, he wasn't a transsexual, not a true one at least. He did get on hormones, and yeah, he did wind up living the life, but under rather disingenuous pretenses, to say the least. So, strange and bizarre, and like I said, I found it very odd that he was engaged to be married to somebody, and I never saw this girl. I didn't even know she existed. He kept her from me, and I mean, now and then he'd go touring, and he would mention, oh, by the way, I have this friend Tatiana, and I saw her for like a second or two once a year, maybe. And I thought she was just a distant friend, and she was always pissed off. And until we finally talked, I understood why she was pissed off. Oh dear. I mean, he had his fans, and there were girls that admired him, but it was like he had no sexuality at all. I mean, again, especially when he tried to hit on me, which I told him, I said, my dear, or as I said to him, but, privately, I said, Henry, don't do that, please. You're like a brother to me, and this is not appropriate. I mean, it's not, I could react a lot of different ways, and all in the negative in that regard when someone is forcing themselves on me. But, I mean, he wasn't like super aggressive. He was just like this shy person who all of a sudden get a burst of energy and just like he wanted to kiss you, and that was it. And then, he acted like an 11-year-old boy with puppy love now and then. And then he would go back to being this shut down shell of a person who just had little to say. And if he did say something, it was about his past and didn't make a hell of a lot of sense. But we'll get into it. I have to do that on another video because we could talk all night about this, because, I mean, it is incredible to believe, and it never made any sense, and I have a feeling that it wasn't the true story. I'm not accusing him of being a liar. No, I just think that the details that he revealed of his most traumatic event, the death of his mother, which is what he used as his excuse for being so strange and despondent, was not an accurate tale. I'm not saying it was exaggerated. I just found elements of it too bizarre to believe. But we'll get into that. He was a good friend, and I admired him, but again, he was no Ross Williams, and only Ross Williams would ever get me to respond to him in a rather positive way in that regards. But even then, my contact with Ross was rather limited in those regards, because Mary was always around. That would be my first wife, Miss Tiny Cancer. And so, and he was always so well behaved because he was a gentleman. Tamlyn was also a gentleman. He was very much the Southern gentleman. And he loved to remind you that he was a Southern boy. He was tried to be like his father in many ways, being a Southern gentleman. That's how his father presented himself. His father was one of those guys, those typical 1960s guys, very tall man. He had the same square head, square jaw, and wear those skinny ties and those tight suits, and with the little white handkerchief. I mean, very immaculate. Not a fold, not a crease that was out of place, not a wrinkle, nothing. Never looked shabby. I mean, always immaculate. Classic man. You don't see too many of that these days, unless they got money, because these days people just don't have the class that they had back in those days. But his father, that's how he projected himself. Now, as far as his relationship with his son, antagonistic, I would say at best, because Tamlyn was a little, I don't want to say really effeminate. He was kind of a strange, odd duck. Like I said before in the last video, he could have easily fit in well with the NB crowd. He was definitely a non-binary, gender fluid, genderqueer person. But again, neither the community nor the support, or for that matter, the terminology existed back then. So he was always the odd duck out. And oddly enough, it wasn't because of drugs, because God knows he didn't do any drugs with me. Certainly, I mean, I was always doing drugs, even in front of him, and he never partook, and frankly, he really didn't drink either. I mean, he never allowed himself to be, anything but composed. He was always straight-laced. He was always quiet. He was always holding himself together, holding back, holding something in. It drove me nuts, I'd be like, Henry, what the fuck is wrong with you? Seriously, man, talk to me. Fuck, he drove me nuts. But, he could be my hero too. I mean, I'd fly in from New York and I didn't have enough cash to get back home, and and I'd call him up and I'd say, hey, Tamlyn, I'm in LAX and I'm kind of strapped right here. It's like, can you come get me? And it's like, yeah, sure. Just give me 40 minutes. I'll get my ass over there. And sure enough, 30 minutes later, he was there. And he did that more than once. He'd pick me up from the airport, take me around, But then, after 9/11, when I had the worst thing happen, which is, if you make the hard choice, and again, this wasn't a choice I wanted to make. This was a matter of survival and priorities, that you go off HRT, that you're going to have a big mass emotional crash. And mine hit just after 9/11, and the full impact of all of that, it hit me so fucking hard. And then to make it worse, my girl in New York decided, because she was afraid of what would happen if I flew, being that everyone was afraid to fly at that moment, that something could happen and she didn't want to be worried, so she decided she wanted to end the relationship. Broke my fucking heart, because this woman was the first woman that really elevated me in ways my first wife never did. Made me feel like a goddamn superstar. Well, partially because I was kind of famous at the time. Apparently not famous enough. She kind of left me for one of the guys in Buck Cherry. But so be it. She helped me go on a path. And, well, Tamlyn was there to help me pick up the pieces. He always was. I cried for 2 straight weeks after she called things off. I wouldn't leave my room. I kept my 38, right there. I didn't sleep. I wound up doing a lot of fucking speed. And I had a loaded gun at my, on my lap in my computer. And I just kept playing breakup songs. Strangely enough, I kept playing that Simple Life song from Gwen Stefani over and over again on a fucking loop, and cried my fucking ass off. And finally Tamlyn decides he's going to do the intervention and says, I got to get you out of here, and you need to fucking eat. Look how much weight you've lost. I mean, you're a fucking skeleton. And dragged my ass out in the middle of the fucking night and said, you're getting in a fucking car, you're coming with me. And I'm like, where the fuck we're going? Takes me to a fucking rock and roll Denny's, which no longer exists, of course, on the Sunset Strip. I was so fucking weak, I could barely fucking walk. He had to hold me up, and he literally had to force feed me hamburgers and shit, just like the old days, but, where this time I wasn't so willing. And he kept me from winding up in the hospital. And like I said, when he wanted to be, he could be my savior, he could be my friend. I mean, I needed groceries now and then because I was starving, because again, movie work was seasonal. I'd come to my aid, and I'd feel horrible and guilty that I asked him to help me buy groceries, and I only asked maybe 2 or 3 times over a 3-year period. When things got really bad, we had a SAG strike, and luckily Leo DiCaprio came to our aid, and He provided food, rent, and utilities for all the background actors at that time. And so, Leo, by chance you are watching, thank you. I owe you one. I seriously do. Because you kept us alive. But once that money ran out, there was Tamlyn again. Helped me pick up the pieces and saved my ass. And I felt just an incredible amount of guilt because I don't like doing that to friends, Though I've had to do it many times because I've always been financially unstable. And, but then I found out that, and I'm not going to mention their name because they're probably watching this and they're probably already pissed off that I've already mentioned them. He had a friend that shamelessly would ask him for 20 grand at a time, and Tamlyn would, being the nice guy that he was, he'd just give it to him. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You're making me feel like shit because you bought me $100 of groceries and you just gave out $20,000. What the fuck, dude? But and he was never bitter about it. Now and then he'd mope and complain and call me up and it's like, hey, I'm just really sad. And I go, well, what's bothering you? And he said, well, I haven't eaten anything. I go, well, why haven't you? Because I don't have any food. What do you mean you don't have any food? Well, this last thing you ate, he said toothpaste. Oh, shut up, you bitch. I tell him, I said, well, let's go get, how come you don't have anything? Didn't you just work on another project? And he said, well, yeah, but I had to loan out $30,000 to my friend. And I'm like, again, the same one? Seriously? This person is living pretty good, and you're moping that you're starving. And it's like, what the fuck is wrong with this picture? Well, this is, again, based on what he told me at the time. And, it used to just piss me off the more I'd hear about how 20 grand here, 30 grand here, and then royalties. And, it's like, damn, but these weren't even, he was being tapped left and right. And so the one time I asked him, again, the third and final time I asked him to help me buy groceries, I didn't feel so bad because it's like, dude, you're going to give someone $30,000 and not even you're too shy to ask him for some of it back, not even a fucking payment plan, then, I'm not going to feel bad for asking you to, shell out 200 in groceries. I'm just not going to do it. If I have it, I'll give it back to you. Of course I will. You never asked me to, and you never made it a condition because Tamlyn wasn't like that. Again, he was saying, well, I'm trying to be a Southern gentleman, a little off my dad. I said, but you hated your dad. He seemed to have a bone to pick with you. And he said, well, yeah, but this is the way I was raised. And, well, I say one thing, he didn't know how to make a mean-ass fried chicken. I will grant you that. And the motherfucker died with the goddamn recipe. Never fucking shared it with me. I don't think he shared it with anybody. Oh, well. And this is how good recipes die. Well, I will get further into the strange sexuality of Tamlyn and this fatalistic association with some of his fans, particularly in Mexico. And London and After Midnight was really popular in Mexico for some reason. They weren't that big here, at least not locally. Locally, they would play the whiskey at most, but they go down to Mexico City and they pack very big halls and, fucking crowds. People just love them there. And God knows I got into quite a few verbals with fans down there because, it's like these people were saints to them. And, they're the rock stars and they could do no wrong. And the fact that Tamlyn just never fucking said anything. They were inclined to believe this saint-like status that he seemed to project, or at least, I don't know. Like I said, he wasn't a villain. He wasn't a manipulator. He really wasn't a liar, but he withheld so much. He kept it all inside. He kept so much inside, and if he revealed anything, none of it made much sense. But you take every little piece of the puzzle and you start to wield it together, a picture starts to emerge. And It's a very strange picture. It's almost disturbing in some certain ways and sad. But again, it all leads to that chair with a little table next to him and a cut up straw and some leftover drugs that he never finished because his heart just gave out. And no one would know about it until the smell of decay started to permeate beyond his doorstep. And it was just so goddamn sad that this is what happened to him. Because despite his deeply flawed persona, and I say deeply flawed, and I've known plenty of deeply flawed people, but his was unique, unlike any others. Very unique. And again, we'll get into that. And I want to remind you, again, I'm not out to do any character assassination. He was my friend, okay? I do miss him. I do care about him, and I was very sad to hear when he died. But people need to know, or maybe not, the truth. The truth of who he really was and who he wasn't. You know, like Roz, he was okay to let people have assumptions about him. Never, unlike his big bandmate, he just was not going to challenge anybody who got anything wrong or said a falsehood about them. No, Tamlyn would just be quiet and sulk and not say anything. It drove me nuts because, of course I'm going to take up for my friend. That's what friends do, right? Especially, us OGs from the scene, LA old goths, if you want to call us. Well, I was one of the original death rockers, at least from the '84 crowd. I wish I could say I was the original founder. That I cannot say. Okay, my ex-wife, the members of the Castration Squad, Community FK, and of course my dear lovely Roz and Chetan and Rick Agnew, all these people, they were the founders. They created the fucking scene. But without them, London After Midnight probably would have not even got those whiskey gigs had it not been for that first scene. And that's the truth of the LA goth history. And so until our next installment, there'll be more to be revealed, and I will share. So please take care. Love you all. Good night.